An ancient alien civilization's relics on Earth hold dangerous powers. The Arkham Corporation's Spriggan agents must keep them out of the wrong hands. Enter 17-year-old S-Class Spriggan agent Ominae. Equipped with his orichalcum gear, a combat knife that can cut through steel like butter, and his muscle suit that both enhances his physical ability as well as allowing him for psychic energy blast, making him not unlike a Z fighter. Netflix's Spriggan brings us 6 45-minute action-packed episodes, each a standalone mission that gives us glimpses of our main protagonist's background and the world that these characters inhabit. Should you watch Spriggan? Short answer, yes, definitely. Just know what you're getting yourself into. Spriggan doesn't hold any punches with its action and violence. It's bloody, brutal, and awesome. It's an action-first series with sci-fi and even supernatural elements. Future weapons and tech, but also possession, evil spirits, and curses. I sum it up as slightly cyberpunk Indiana Jones. David Production, the animation studio that famously works on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, uses a mix of 3D modeling with 2D animation. And for the most part in Spriggan, it looks amazing with very fluid animation. There were a few times that the 3D modeling kind of stood out to me, looking a little choppy as I'd explain it. I really only noticed this in the first episode, and I probably got used to it for the rest of the season. And strangely enough, it wasn't really combat sequences that I noticed this. It was when characters were kind of standing around talking, moving slowly, or turning slowly. I do call this a season because there's no way that the plot is wrapped up at the end of these 6 45-minute episodes, which is a little bit odd for anime, I will say, because we're mostly used to 22 to 25-minute episodes, but I'm glad Spriggan was actually structured this way. That's because each episode of Spriggan is centered around a single mission for Ominae, excluding the first episode, Flame Serpent, which actually includes 2. The first 7 minutes follows the aptly named First Mission, a previously unreleased mission from the Spriggan manga, which actually recounts the origins of Yu gaining his muscle suit. Netflix's adaptation of this mission, and the story in general, thankfully cuts out this origin story as we get thrown right into a battle-ready Ominae. So no need for an origin story here, which is actually something the 1998 film didn't leave out. And yes, if you weren't aware, there is a film adaptation of Spriggan back from 1998 from Studio 4C. The film covers what we get in episode 2 of this series, the Noah's Ark plotline. Unfortunately, it's nearly impossible to watch right now as it isn't available to stream or even buy on DVD anywhere. But that being said, let me know if you'd like a video on the 1998 film. And yes, there's also a Spriggan manga, which I actually have a video on its weird and dark history and past in the US, a controversial subplot including a revived Hitler, and many anti-American themes, which we even see on full display in this Netflix adaptation. Previously, the US only had 3 heavily edited volumes of the manga released by Viz back in the early 90s under the title Striker. But lo and behold, 7 Seas Entertainment will be releasing the entire manga in English for the first time in the US in 4 deluxe omnibuses, the first one coming out in November, and to my surprise, the day before the anime came out, they actually released the digital version of Omnibus 1, so you can go grab it right now. I'll leave an Amazon link in my description that helps my channel out if you decide to buy it there. But this Netflix adaptation is pretty spot on to the manga from what I've seen so far, except for that one part in the origin story of the first episode. One adjustment they did make was setting the timeline to that of a modern one, which is why we see cell phones and modern technology. The manga is set near the end or just slightly after the Cold War. But as I was saying, the United States is not portrayed as the good guys here at all, as many of the antagonists are current or former US military agents, cyborgs, or even generals. Hell, the 2 US cyborgs in episode 2, Fat Man and Little Boy, are literally named after the atomic bombs that the US sent over to Hiroshima and Nagasaki back in World War II. The US and the Spriggan universe are definitely bastards. But the US is not alone here, as we also see the SAS, the KGB, and even neo-Nazis as bad guys. And yes, this brings me to an interesting point. Yes, these missions are mostly one-off in nature, but we do get slivers of world and character development for Ominae and this version of Earth. We see Yu in class, some of his child soldier upbringing, and a few hints that Arkham may not be exactly as they seem through character interactions throughout the episodes. I'm really hoping that Netflix picks up Spriggan for multiple seasons because there is a lot more here to get through. Especially when looking at the best episode of the series, episode 6, the final episode, The Forgotten Kingdom, which was the only episode that I hadn't been able to previously read the manga on, as it was never translated. But if future episodes of Spriggan can be structured like this one, which was the best combination of plot, action, character development, and even world building, I think we'd be looking at a really great anime series. And normally we binge Netflix series as they release all episodes all at once on the same day. And the way that Spriggan is set up, I think that this format actually works against Spriggan. There's no major overarching narrative, at least for Season 1. Yes, I mentioned that there are slivers of this, but there's no main end goal that you is working towards by the end of Episode 6. Episodes don't end on huge cliffhangers, they end up more like mini movies. It really just feels like a day in the life of S-Class Spriggan Ominae. He's in school but has to go leave and travel to some other country to save the world by making sure some newly found artifact doesn't end up in the wrong hands. I'm speaking towards this format because not ending each episode of Spriggan on a heavy plot-driven cliffhanger makes Spriggan feel a little bit of like a chore to binge. Berserker had a combination of a terrible looking CGI monster and not the most interesting storyline. And maybe I'm a little bit biased here because I didn't find the arc in the manga to be that interesting in general. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad. It actually does some decent world building, showing us how advanced some of these ancient civilizations were with this Berserker monster. I just wonder sometimes about binging shows, especially one such as Spriggan, which is clearly from a different time as it's from the late 80s and early 90s. Getting one 45-minute episode a week for 6 weeks would have been a completely different experience. Seeing you take on a different adventure in a mini film type format each week would have been great. I get this is mostly a me problem. I binged the series so I can work on this review. I could have just watched one episode every couple nights. But even with that being said, we had some truly amazing episodes in this series. Episode 2, Noah's Ark, Episode 5, The Crystal Skull, and Episode 6, The Forgotten Kingdom were all amazing, 5 out of 5s in my book. Episode 1, Flame Serpent, was a great introduction to the series, and Episode 3, The Forest of No Return, had my favorite battle sequence. It was short and sweet, and the music was perfect. Overall, Spriggan's the total package here. I'm going to give Spriggan a solid 4 out of 5. Great action, animation, soundtrack, and even the dub was pretty good, I gotta admit. I wanted to give it a 5 out of 5, I really did. But I feel like we didn't get much meat plot-wise until the final 2 episodes. I really enjoyed what I saw, but Spriggan is definitely an action-forward series. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but I believe fully developed characters, world building, and narrative arcs are a must-have for a series to truly be amazing. It's needed to grab the viewer. David Production does seem to be clinging pretty closely to the source material here, which is why we're getting a bunch of scenes of Ominae in high school and the one-off mission format. I don't know where the manga goes from here, but I hope that you, the character, gets more developed and not just you, the killing machine, as well as this Arkham may actually be the bad guy storyline. That's a good turn at the end. Luckily, we do have sequences and characters that break up the serious action tone of the series a bit here. Yoshino, the treasure hunter, for example, had me definitely chuckling a few times. And even the school sequences at the beginning and end help break up the tension going from episode to episode. I find that anime that I'm typically drawn to has a perfect mix of plot, characters, and action, while still sprinkling in a bit of comedy to help keep everything from getting too serious. And before I wrap up, just in case you didn't miss it, there was a post-credit scene, so here's a spoiler warning for that. It looks like Yu is actually being targeted by Spriggan itself for assassination, as we see another young, I'm guessing Spriggan agent getting orders to assassinate number 43, which is Ominae. His eyes blink red, which Yu's did a few times this series, when I'm hoping that gets explained. We just better get more Spriggan because that last episode and even that post-credit scene has me craving more. I'm going to read through that first deluxe edition of the manga as there's some additional chapters I haven't been able to read before, and I'll work on a 1998 film video if you guys think you'd be interested in that. Let me know in the comments. I'd even consider breaking down these 6 episodes in more detail, comparing them to the manga if this video gets enough likes and views and if there's enough interest out there. As I mentioned earlier, check out this video of the dark and weird history of the Spriggan manga's release in the US. Subscribe and consider supporting me on Patreon. I create anime and manga videos every week. Until next time, I'll see ya.